So you have those days in your life when maybe it's just because I'm getting older, who knows? Um, when you try to get to do something. I have a shaver for shaving my head and decided to buy a new blade because it's been had that for ages.
It's a trimmer. You usually trim your hair.
Hair trimmer, yes. And so I bought this razor blade and decided to put it on. It wasn't that difficult to do, and I think it actually sharpened it up a lot. And I was getting it all set up in the bathroom, and I looked up and I just turned it on and went, okay. And I zipped through it, zipped to the right to the middle of my head, and then noticed that I forgot to put, there's a little extension you put on there so it doesn't get it all the way down to the bare knuckles. And then I had to
The
decide,
bare
okay,
knuckles.
do I, because my brother said after I sent him a picture of this that I had bald, he said, "Is that dad?" And because my dad had just a little on the side of it, maybe I should have just cut it, and made
No.
it light. I know.
So Don's been cutting his own hair for a while. He's been using what do you call that? I want to say hedge trimmer. To just to just buzz it short. But you didn't put the whatever you put on it.
It's just a little extension that lifts it up so it doesn't cut it all down to, and I went right to the blade. So I had to shave the whole thing off, and it's been really weird though, because it's like you feel the breeze so much more, and I don't know, it just feels awkward. I feel like lurch, you know. But anyway, that's that was my those rough mornings when we just don't get it
You
right.
shave all your hair off accidentally.
Yeah. So hi, this is Don.
And this is Gina. I haven't shaved my hair off yet. And we're with Focused Healthy Family.
And this is podcast. Oh boy, I think it's number 180. I gotta check on that one too. I forgot about that, but we'll check on that,
Maybe
get
it's on
that
the back of
straightened
your
out.
head.
And today we're talking about solo aging, the idea of people that like women, that women, 20% of women and boom, boomer women didn't have babies and didn't have kids. So they go, they get into their elderly life and they don't have somebody to prepare for them. But we got some jokes, don't we?
Yeah, you're bouncing all over.
I'm bouncing. Sorry. I will try to sit still.
It helps if you put both feet on the floor.
That would be helpful too.
All right. So, an elderly looking gentleman in his mid 90s is very well dressed. His hair is well groomed. Um, he has a great suit on, a flower in his lapel, smelling slightly of good aftershave. Um, Walks into an upscale cocktail lounge. Seated at the bar is an elderly looking lady. The gentleman walks over, sits alongside her, orders a drink, takes a sip, and turns to her and says, "So tell me, do I come here often?"
You repeated it when we did a year, some time ago,
Oh, we said that. We
but
told this joke
it's a
before.
good repeat. So, and I will lead unless do you have another one? Are you still guessing or
No, no,
we're a little loose today, I think, with what we're doing. But
yeah.
I'm going to read a little caregiver tip 101, um, one-on-one ways to keep caregiving from making you crazy. And this is tip number 72, and it's about finding a good listener. And I figure when we're talking about aging people, I think being a good listener for the caregiver, but also for the person that we're dealing with. But so this is tip number 72, uh, finding a good listener. Find a friend with whom you can talk about your problem, but don't wear out your welcome. Be willing to listen to their issues too. Good way to vent is to call or to go to a friend and say, I need to vent for 10 minutes. Just listen. At the end of the 10 minutes, stop me. And if you have any suggestions, then I would appreciate hearing them. Also, remember that as crazy as it may sound, pets are great listeners. You don't have to listen to their problems.
I like that. Talk to your pets. It is good to have someone you can share with, that you can vent, whether it's at a support group or a trusted friend or someone. Sometimes it helps if it's outside the family, if you're navigating caring for people in your family. It's complicated. Everybody's got their own perspective on it. And
Well,
so,
and today like I say, we're kind of talking about um, last week we talked about aging in place, or 2 weeks ago talked about aging in place with Stewart, and today we're talking about those that are solo aging.
so maybe they don't have any children, they don't have other family members to support them.
Because they talk, like I said, about 20% of baby boomers, women didn't have babies, so they end up. They also talked about there's a what they call the gray divorce. And they talk about 40% of people that divorce are after the age of 50,
Okay.
and they run into the same kind of problems. They can be uh, some of them have, of course, have children, but some of them don't. So it's kind of a interesting combination there. But
I've seen that working in geriatric rehab where sometimes it's an ex-spouse who comes in because they divorced, but they're still on friendly terms to some
mm,
degree, that they're still helping them in a difficult situation, whether they, had a stroke, had an illness, something going on, but sometimes they don't have someone.
so they talk about some of the things that that solo aging people kind of concerned about. I think all aging people think about this, but even more so as a solo. A couple of things that they really want to maintain independence. They want to have physical strength. They want to have good health. They also want to hold on to good mental capabilities, mental abilities, and they're worried about their finances too, whether their finances are strong enough.
So those are just things in general that aging people worry about. Did this come from an article? I'm curious.
This is from AARP. There was
Oh,
an
okay.
article
An
done by
article.
AARP.
Okay.
Um, they talked about it, they talked about that as kind of a positive way. They were looking at that they want to maintain these things.
Because I would say that's true of most people in general as they're aging, not just people.
Well, yeah, that as I say that. Um, But then their major fears that they go into are, well, first off is fear of dying alone. If you don't have somebody to support you, they don't have the children to support you, then you can that can be a real fear to be able to die alone. Um, Being able to move somewhere um, against their will, being put somewhere. I remember my grandmother, my mother's mother had such a hard time, and they were just moving her between family members. It wasn't even like moving into a nursing home. They were just living, but she still had trouble with it because, well, one, it was moving her out of her own home, and two, it was constantly being changed. About every month and a half, they would move her to a new home, and she'd have to readjust to that every time.
Mhm.
Um, Having a court appointed someone to make their decisions for them. And you looked up some of that information of who those appointments are. Or,
Well, no, I was just looking at um, who you can reach out to for a power of attorney if you don't have a trusted child or other family member. Who can you ask? Because you want to set that in place before you need it. You want to pick that person who will step in and help make either healthcare or financial decisions for you. And, the financial could be if you have a lawyer, you have a financial planner, or someone you trust, because you can choose separately a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney. So it just talked about, do you have a really good neighbor? Do you have someone you have a good relationship with? And then there's the um, elder law. There's an agency on elder law. We'll put it in the links, that you can reach out to find resources and support. But making that decision ahead of time, because if you become to the point where you're incompetent, and a court appoints someone to care for you, that decision is being made on your behalf.
But it may,
It,
well, it goes back to what we kind of talk about, you know, talking ahead of time before somebody gets to that stage. That's a big part for us to think about with aging people is that talk before when they can make the decision, and it's kind of tough because most people don't want to. You know, they want to be able to make they want to make the decisions, but they don't really want to talk about it up
sure.
front.
So, this is outside of our realm of what we usually talk about because we talk about uh, being caregivers for someone who's aging. And so you might know someone who doesn't have family member. Maybe they have a son, but they don't speak to them, or they
No, yeah.
didn't have children, or they never got married, or for whatever reason, they don't have people to step in and support and help them. But sometimes they have a friend, and yeah, encouraging people to make these choices before they're in a position where they can't care for themselves in some capacity. And then they're either going to get in a really bad situation, wind up in the hospital, and then things will be decided for them. So, what else does it talk
Well,
about?
there's two more little things that they worry about. One is lack of companionship, not having somebody to discuss and talk things with. Not, again, not even having maybe not even having children that they can talk to and things like that. And then the last one is scams and frauds, which
Mm.
are getting, and we're still looking for, wanting to find someone that can come on and talk more about that, because that's getting bigger and bigger as we go along. And the more things they can do with it, like we talked about the AI that allows them to copy people's voices and things like that. And that's a real scare for people.
It is, and I've been getting one from North Carolina DMV, and it looks so real. It's a really long text message that says you have an outstanding bill. This is the final notice. I mean, it's a huge paragraph. It goes on and on. Follow this link. You must pay this. And but it's not real. And but it I keep getting it, and it's very convincing that it is real. Um, and so yeah, anybody who I mean, it doesn't take much for people to, fall for these things and to see them because maybe they did have, a traffic ticket or, something out there that leads
And they,
them to believe that. And who knows what happens when you click on this link? Obviously, I'm not going to do it. Um, but it's
but
probably asking for you to send money to a particular place.
we're mentally in good enough shape that we can see that. But you get somebody that is bordering on dementia, bordering on those kind of things, they
Or they're
could,
just alone
yeah, and they
and
think,
they're older and they're not used to the age of technology and things and don't have family members like talking to them about these things. Yeah, I mean, you've fallen for some of the scams,
"Mm,
and um, I had to ask my kids over and over, this isn't real, right? Because it looks like the website's coming from the DMV. Um, I had to really press it, but it's better to assume scam.
yeah, yeah."
Sometimes it's gotten so prevalent, like you talked about.
So the other thing I came up with, I was looking. This is under Kipling, Kiplinger.com. They talk about things to think about in preparation for possibly aging alone or whatever. Um, So the first thing they talk about is who will you call in an emergency at 2 in the morning, you know, and being able to find. They talk about kind of putting together almost like a little team of people that you can call on, whether it be a neighbor, a friend, even different associations. Probably, I'm trying to think if there's any that you could actually call. Of course, you can always call like 911 in an emergency. That would be the first place
I
to
mean,
call.
it's a thing to keep in mind in general. I know that one of the support groups my mom went to when my dad was still at home with her, um, they suggested you need to ask a neighbor if something were to happen and you'd need someone to sit with him, that they could come until that me or you, Don, could get there because at the time we lived about 40 minutes away. And it can be difficult for people to ask for help. But when my mom realized, okay, this is just someone who could be there for an hour until one of her kids could get there, um, and it took people talking about it at a meeting, recommending this. So, yeah, you need to have somebody you can call, whether it's to help out if you're caring for someone or just um, if you're aging alone, having
Mhm.
those people that you can reach out to, having people check on you. I don't know the exact statistic, but almost half of the people I see for rehab, it's related to a fall. And I've heard so many different kinds of stories about people who fall. And it's always so much better when there's someone who checks on them regularly, either with a phone call or stops by, and then they discover, they're not responding, they're not answering, because I've had heard stories of people who fall and they're on the ground for a day and a half, or and it could be even longer for someone else. And
Well, and a lot of times they don't think about they get these responder things that you can press, but they don't wear them. They forget them, set them aside, and all of that, which makes it, even worse.
and in today's day, you can have a cell phone and you can keep it on you, but if you become unconscious and can't activate it,
Mm.
then what? There are I know the independent living place I work, um, the buttons they use, I think it's a Lively company. When it hits the floor, it goes off. It calls 911. They come on and talk to you. And so if you're alone, you don't have people who can check on you regularly, that could be a really helpful thing because it's
Mm.
far better. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or just people's pride. They don't want to bother people. They don't want to have to deal with that. But if you fall and you're unconscious and you can't reach out to someone, do you want to be found either dead or in really bad condition? Um, wouldn't it be better that if you fall, you're wearing this, it contacts 911. If you can't respond to the person on the line, then they call for, and send a responder out to check on you.
Well, the second thing is they talk about, where do you begin getting ready for solo retirement? And they talk about coming up with a plan that covers things like legal matters, healthcare needs, long-term care planning, housing and transportation choices, support networks, strategies for living and engage life and finances. So always thinking ahead about these and kind of planning ahead, making up a plan for yourself. And then, of course, you always want to make sure to distribute it to somebody else that can take, if you can't handle it.
Yes, letting somebody know where that plan is, because you could have everything in place, but then people don't know that it's there, and finding a trusted person. And yeah, we'll pull up that link to the elder care lawyers. Again, I can't think of the acronym.
Well, yeah, they
And
talk about it here. The third one is finding local professional resources to help, and they talk about elder law attorneys, uh, patient advocates, geriatric care managers to kind of oversee your health issues, financial professionals, um, all of these different things that can kind of guide you along in the professional world. Uh, the fourth one is financial documents you need, and they talk about the durable power of attorney, um, and they have different ones. They depending on what you want to have done. There's durable power of attorney, there's limited power of attorney, and then there's one called the spring power of attorney, which doesn't take effect unless the solo ager is declared incompetent. The um, the next one goes in and well, the other thing they mention is, of course, a will and all the different parts of the will that we need. And then they go, number one, they go, or number five, they go into um, medical documents that you might need, healthcare power of attorney, a living will. Are you familiar with a little bit with the living will and what it has to offer?
well, I mean, that's, decisions as far as
DNR, like DNR and things like that.
yeah, there's do not resuscitate. There's different versions of that, whether you want to be intubated or not, or put on life support. So it puts those things into place. Because maybe, yeah, you want to be resuscitated, but you don't want to be intubated is when they put a tube down your throat to help you breathe if you can't breathe on your own. There's different areas where you can accept or deny, and you can spell that out. There's also a form called medical orders for scope of treatment. And as I was researching this, I think each state may have a different. So I'm looking at the North Carolina one. So this goes into a little more detail. We did this for my father when he was reaching hospice stage of life. And what it does is because he already had the DNR and everything in place. So this asks that question first, do you want to be resuscitated or not? And then it asks about medical interventions. Do you want full scope of treatment, limited, or comfort measures only? And so that means comfort measures only means you don't want to be transported to the hospital. If someone is at the end stage of their life and they're in the process of actively dying, the last thing they want is to be uprooted from wherever it is they're living, get subject to all kinds of tests at the hospital. And so those three different specifications kind of spell that out. I think what we did with my dad was that, unless he was like bleeding out or something, they would contact us first before sending him to the hospital. The next section talks about antibiotics. Do you want antibiotics? Determine limited use of it or no antibiotics at all. Um, then there's medically administered fluids and nutrition, deciding whether you want to be given IV fluids or not, and nutrition, like through a tube if you cannot eat yourself. And so there's all these different sections. When we did this, I think someone either from palliative care or maybe where he was living went through it with us, and maybe it was the facility, and for us to pick which ones, they explained it to us in detail. um, and so it was really helpful to have this and to be able to kind of make these decisions ahead of time, because he had been sent to the hospital so many times. And even his neurologist at the time was having these episodes of low blood pressure or something, and they're like, that's just common with Parkinson's, and he doesn't need to be keep going to the hospital for these things, and it's traumatic. Someone with dementia and someone with limited mobility for whatever reason, the emergency department is not set up for these people. And I think about when I was there with my dad, I almost always see an elderly person, often on the bed or the stretcher, whatever you want to call it, in the hallway, just laying there all alone. And it just break my heart, that not everybody has someone who can be there, and sometimes not at all, or, not for a while. And it's confusing and there's a lot of noise, and it can cause a whole lot for someone who especially has any degree of dementia and is prone to agitation and just disorientation, that it's a completely disorienting environment to be in. If you live in a big city, there's police sometimes coming in. At one time, my dad was convinced he was being arrested. He's like, "I'm sorry, I'll whatever I did wrong, and because there was someone in the emergency room, there was an incident with the police, and he was just thought this was about him." It's very frustrating to me, and I feel like there's specialty children's emergency rooms at big cities, hospitals. There needs to be one for the elderly, because
The whole different world that they
it
have,
is. And so having these decisions in place ahead of time, um, because, when you're reaching end of life, whatever that looks like, depending on medical things you have going on, it's something that you need to acknowledge. And oftentimes, what I see is the families are more resistant. I've had people, their mom is in their 90s or something, and they don't want to do much anymore. They don't want to get out of bed anymore. And they're like, "You've got to work, and we want you to have therapy and want you to get stronger." And they say they're ready to die. I'm like, "No, you don't mean that." It's like
they
they're
do.
not going to live forever. They've already made it to 95 or whatever. They've had a good life. It's like when someone who's over 90 refuses therapy, it's like, there's a point where you get to decide. And that's a tricky thing with, if they have a level of dementia and can't make the best decisions for themselves. And yet, our society tends to push living and life and you got to live forever. Um, and we had somebody, she was 100 something at one of the skilled nursings I worked at. And the family agreed to therapy. And it was like, if she wants it, we'll do it. So some days she wanted to, and some days she did it. And then, the family was in agreement. If she doesn't want to, let's not push her. Um, so realizing, death is a part of life. And I just think there needs to be more open discussion about it. It needs to be more conversations. And related to how you want things to proceed. It's not as simple as just do not resuscitate or not. You can have things in place like the living will that will be more specific, um, depending on the situation.
Well, and they actually, the next thing talks about if you didn't plan on being a solo age, you didn't think that was so. What they're talking about again kind of goes over what we talked about, but I think it doesn't hurt for a couple to think about if we make it together and all of that, that's great, and we can age that way. But also think about if one person or whatever doesn't, what's going to happen then. So it's kind of taking additional steps when you're preparing um, as a couple, as a couple getting ready for that, but also if one of them has to go, and what happens then? How do you survive if the other partner is gone? So it talks a lot about that, and it's really the same kind of plan as planning it out ahead of time, but talking through both parts of that.
I found it's the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys
Ah,
is the website I found. And they talk about different resources, how to find a lawyer, why hire an elder and special needs attorney, additional resources. And so this is just one organization that's out there. There are people who specialize, in these areas and, finding other geriatric practitioner specialists while we're talking about this. Um,
well, just the last thing while you're looking that up, the last thing they talk about is, of course, you don't have to do this alone, and looking out for neighbors, for friends, for associations out there that can help. There are a lot more, I think, than we even think about. Like you said, your mom looked for different things that got her some different help of different sorts. That's the kind of thing you got to look for. And so it doesn't mean you have to do this whole thing alone, even if you're working on a solo aging kind of scenario. So anyway,
um, so just something else to make people aware of, and I may have talked about this before, but um, um, ombudsman, Ombudsman. So they're ombudsmans for long-term care. If your loved one's in a facility and you don't feel like they're getting the care they should, these people advocate for them. There are Medicaid ombudsmans, there are Medicare ombudsmans. I know I reached out to somebody one time about um, dealing with my daughter's Medicaid insurance. It was really hard to speak to people and get the answers. And I had one of them and she actually made the phone call with me and I was asking this woman a question and the woman with Medicaid didn't seem to understand my question, but the ombudsman was able to really help advocate with me. Um, and so that's something that you can learn more about. There's different for each state. I think they're state specific, but they can be advocates, and it didn't cost anything. They're, I think, through the government. Hopefully, um, just people in place to help support someone. So whether it's someone personally, um, you're visiting your loved one at a facility and you hear others complaining about it, letting people know that there are services and support out there for people. Sometimes a matter of just sharing some information with someone that you might encounter as you're navigating your own journey, caring for aging loved ones. And we can share those links as well for the podcast here.
well, and just kind of I guess rehash some is, Know that there's fears out there if you're caregiving for an aging person, especially if you are caregiving for someone who's aging alone, alone. There are a lot of fears out there, and to be accepting and be a good listener for that, good talking to it, um, knowing there are ways to plan around that, to think through it, and kind of um, gauge what direction you want to go as an aging loved one. Um,
And have those difficult conversations. Maybe you're an only child, you have a solo parent living, and find out what they want because it is their life and not yours. And that's a tough thing to step back and say, what is it that they want? How do they want their end of their life to look like? And to respect that. Um, and even if they already have dementia, the sooner you talk about things, the better, trying to bring things up in conversation. And it can be really difficult, even in a really good relationship. But keeping that in mind, I think, is essential. It's their life. Yes, maybe you're responsible for them now. You're their caregiver, whatever the situation is. And yet, it is still their life.
well, and think about the communication too. How you approach someone um, can be challenging. They'll want to avoid it. And then what I always like to say is, if you can approach it by saying, I really would like to have you as part of the decision making as you get older. And so that's why I'd like to talk about it now instead of waiting to a point where you're unable to make the decisions and I have to make it or somebody has to make it for you.
And if they don't want to talk about it, you could write a list of questions, let them
Give it some
answer it at
time.
their leisure. Sometimes just face to face conversation's too much for people, but asking them to write things out or record things or some format like that to get a better understanding. Well, we hope this information has been helpful to you today, um, and we appreciate you listening. Please give us a comment, feedback. Let us know what topics you've enjoyed, what you'd like to hear more of. If you know somebody um, who might be of value to others and that might be willing to come on our podcast, please either share our information to them or let us know about this person. We're always looking to have people on to interview, like someone to talk about fraud and things in the elderly. We thought we had someone, and then sometimes people get busy with everything else they have going and they have to cancel, and we're not haven't been able to reschedule that person in particular. But let us know. And please check out our website where you can learn more about things going on and what we can do to support you. Every Tuesday night, Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m., join Don online for EFT tapping. You can learn about what tapping is. It's a short little group session that he does. You can join in.
Yeah, you simply go to focusedhealthyfamily.com/EFT-group.
And remember, you can find us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family, Instagram, Focused Healthy Family 1, YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. Again, if you're listening to this where you listen to a podcast, you can also listen and watch on YouTube and vice versa. Please share this with anybody you know. If any of the topics we've talked about, someone might be interested in, you can do a search on our website in the podcast and see what other things we've covered, other things we've discussed, some great people that we've interviewed. So please listen and share that information. Join us every Thursday. That's when we drop our podcast each week. Um, Again, find us at focusedhealthyfamily.com. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.